All right, well, I have 2 o'clock, so we will go ahead and start. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the third session in the 2019 Conversations with Colleagues series, which is being hosted by the TRB Bicycle and Pedestrian Data Subcommittee. These webinars take place every fourth Tuesday of every other month and are typically focused around challenges in bicycle and pedestrian traffic monitoring. Today's session is going to be focusing on standardizing and collecting bicycle and pedestrian count data with local partners. My name is Nathan Hicks, and I will be moderating today's session. Also on the line are Greg Lindsay and Peter Ohms and Sarah O'Brien, who will be in the background to assist with answering any questions as necessary. Our 2 speakers today are Michael Petesch, who is a pedestrian and bicyclist data coordinator from Minnesota DOT Office of Transit and Active Transportation, as well as Sarah Searcy, the bicycle and pedestrian program manager at the Institute for Transportation Research and Education for ITRE. I'm going to go through a few ground rules here at first. As in previous sessions, the aim is to have a more conversational tone overall, so feel free to jump in or ask questions throughout the presentation. And if you'd like, you can also raise the question, the chat hand, or raise your hand, or if you'd like, we can unmute your microphone so that way you can ask the question, or if you'd like, you can put something into the chat pod. We'll be monitoring all of those areas today. So as I mentioned earlier, Greg and Peter will be monitoring the questions for the Q&A. But if you're having also any audio or other technical problems, please be sure to let us know and type that into the chat area so that we can go ahead and try and assist you today. And following the webinar, we'll be providing a summary, which will include links or references that are made throughout the webinar itself, as well as a recording. Overall, today's goal for the session is to review various methods and best practices that are employed by MNDOT and ITRE regarding standardizing and collecting bicycle and pedestrian data collection for local partners. And without a further ado, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Michael Petesch.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm just waiting for the controls, I think. Oh, all right. Should be showing soon. Great. Well, thank you again for the invitation. As Nathan mentioned, I'm Michael Petesch, the Pedestrian and Bicyclist Data Coordinator. Let's see if I can advance the slide. It was working. There we go. It's nice to have I enjoy having a face going with a name. So I've been in my role as the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Data Coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Transportation for the past just over 3 years officially. And what we try and do here is to make it safer, easier, and more convenient for people of all ages and abilities to get to where they need to go, however they need to do it. So I wanted to give a little bit of background as far as it relates to the program that I run today, and conveniently it kind of it pretty much follows my professional, I guess, professional work as well, just kind of how I've progressed through these different programs and ultimately come to where I am now. So you may be aware that back in, I think it was 2007, 2008, there was a non-motorized transportation pilot program for communities around the nation where we're awarded large amounts of money to improve and track performance measures for biking and walking, and the Twin Cities was one of them. And so between 2011 and 2013, I worked with that group. 2013 to 2016, worked with Greg Lindsay, who's on the call as well, at the University of Minnesota on a grant project that was funded by MnDOT to look at different types of people counting technologies, try and come up with what a program would look like, and think about ways how to institutionalize and make a lasting program that some agencies such as the state DOT could take and run with and continue. And then in 2016, I was hired as in my current role as the bicycle and pedestrian data coordinator. And so I have about 8 years of experience on this. And then there's also, because of all those years, there's a lot of different, I know that there's a lot of different issues in terms of standardization and data that's been collected, and challenges and opportunities. So like Lockton cities, we had monthly manual counts at 6 locations, plus several other annual ones, and then a few that were automated. At the U of M, Greg and I, with local partners, collected about 200 or so automated counts, and then they were all in using different vendor technologies and things. So there was roughly 5 formats, data output formats. And then now at MnDOT, we have 22 permanent counting sites, 18 portable counters, and then we also inherited roughly 230 plus manual counts from between 2012 and 2016 that I'm currently having a colleague, or working with a colleague, to make sense of it so we can map it and use it, and use it just as we have used some of the automated equipment counts. So there's been a lot of different stuff that we've collected, and this will touch on a little bit of what the program has evolved into, and then some ways in which we are thinking about the future. So just for a little bit more background, the current MnDOT program that I manage, it is divided essentially into 2 separate parts. We have permanent sites and then portable counting sites. And the permanent sites are, some of the equipment is technically can be portable, but it's just for the time being affixed to a single location. So for the permanent sites, we have, they're all continuous counters, they're all eco counters, and we have 29 separate counters at 22 sites. Some sites have multiple counters because one is counting in one direction on a roadway and the other is counting the other direction. 13 of which are on trails, 9 are on roads. It was a very joint effort in terms of identifying the locations for all of the counters. MnDOT essentially bought the counters with research dollars and then asked the locals where they thought the best locations for the highest volumes of people would be. And then MnDOT is responsible for developing factors and estimates, and we've released a few summary reports of the data that we've observed. The portable counting, so it's essentially like we've set it up kind of like a library book loaning program. I mentioned there's 18, but there's really 16 that are, I guess, able to be booked and used. Checked out and used. So Minnesota is split up into 8 MnDOT districts, and each district has one set of 2 portable counters. It's free to use. The locals collect the information that they want, use it for whatever they want, but MnDOT also has access to the data as well. And we can see the numbers of cities, sites, and installations has increased each year that the program has been in effect. So I'm just going to run through this list of challenges that we are experiencing. So there's many different partners that are currently involved in data collecting, but also that are interested in collecting. We have lots of data and formats. Like I mentioned, as a state, we've had automated counts going back to 2012, maybe even sooner. And then there's also a lot of manual counts that are precede that as well. Quality assurance and quality control. We try to do as much as we can, but honestly, that's not much. Just mainly due to staff resources and I guess some knowledge is an aspect of it too. We developing day of year factors and using it to estimate and impute numbers for missing days and outliers and things. We've come up with a methodology for that, and it's just the process is still fairly tricky because again, it's limited resources. Sharing data, in addition to that, also making sure that the ways in which we are sharing data ensures that the data is consistent across whoever shares the story, because we want to be as consistent and as united in our message as possible across all of the many partners that we have. We want to have the data in a timely and consistent manner so that we can make data-driven decisions. And then I guess last two, resources. So currently we have a lot less than the motor vehicle monitoring and data collection program. Just for context, within our central office, the one that I work out of, there's seven dedicated staff members for motor vehicle counting, and then there's several others in each of the MnDOT districts that work with the locals to get the automated counts and temporary portable counts all aggregated and formatted the correct way. And right now it's just me doing it for the non-motorized. There's some support in each of the districts, but in terms of the actual data, it's essentially just me. And then expansion, what does that look like? What can we afford? Those typical types of questions. So some ways that we are trying to address these challenges are, number one, convening. So we've about a year ago, just over a year ago, I have convened, or I started this task force group to start collectively discussing all these challenges that all of us face. It's not just the state DOT, it's locals, and what do we do with our data, and how do we ensure that it's correct, and all this stuff. So it's a wide breadth of knowledge and different sizes and jurisdictions, and it's a great group to be a part of, and we've come a long way in terms of what our goals and what we believe our united mission is. Number two, we've, like I mentioned, MnDOT has developed a factoring protocol or methodology to develop day of year factors. So this is essentially the process that we follow. And I don't know if the PowerPoint will be shared at the end, but if you click on impute, that'll just bring you to our webpage with more information, some of the reports. You can download the annual data, that sort of stuff. So it's a fairly standard method, and Greg and several other U of M researchers and motor vehicle analysts also helped with the methodology. So it takes into account weather and other attributes too. Seems to work pretty well. Number three, we are currently embarking upon a strategic plan with a consultant. And so this is, we're specifically tapping the knowledge of that task force group that I mentioned, as well as some of the motor vehicle analysts and technicians and myself. And so collectively, we've come up with a mission and purpose for the group and the strategic plan. Like I mentioned, we convened a bunch of partners. We have also gone through individual strengths and assets of each of the jurisdictions that are involved or that we think have a role to play in this field. And we're also exploring data warehouse options. So I'm not entirely sure which route is the best route, because I know that FHWA has now has capability to accept non-motorized data, as well as the Portland State Bike Ped portal. And there's also opportunities for us to develop something in-house. So if there's, I'm posing this question to the group that's listening, and then just, I guess, the broader community, if you have more ideas as to, or suggestions as to what has worked for you or your organization, state, in terms of many partners trying to share lots of different information and also access it, I would love to hear it. And then the kind of the fifth bubble there is communication again. So making sure that we're consistent, but also providing data in time to make some important decisions before projects to inform policies and plans, other things like that. Number 4, I guess this is kind of going to the communication, expanding upon that. So again, having meaningful, I guess I spell meaningful, right? Meaningful stories shared consistently and in a timely manner. Again, that timely manner is a big thing that's currently with the resources that I have. It takes longer than I want it to, and so, but an instance in which it did, extra data did provide. Was provided in a timely manner and able to make a change this is a photo of a highway in north central Minnesota. So it's dividing a community in community center, housing and such, from casino and jobs and food and movie theater. And it's about an eighth of a mile between the two red ovals on the left side. See if I can use my mouse. And so it's about 1/8 of a mile between these two. And down here, there's a marked crosswalk, as you can see, with a stoplight. And then up here, there's just a little gap in the fence. And so with some pretty basic video counting, we found that there were about 4 people per day using this crossing, and about 136 people per day using this rather unmarked crossing. So we were able to provide that information to the local community, and they applied for additional funds and have been able to implement, actually build a sidewalk along the frontage road, and then we'll be creating a hawk system or safer crossing and formalizing the gap in the fence as well. So again, here's just some photo collages of activities that we witnessed going through the gap in the fence. And yes, there were 1 and 2 dogs that used the crossing too. So it's trying to match meaningful information with areas that are in most need of either safety interventions or just receiving the right kind of treatment, and providing that information before things are built so that we don't have a mismatch between resources and need. Number 5, this is ultimately what I want to be able to do. It's essentially an annual average daily traffic map, but I want to be able to click on any segment, road segment, trail segment in Minnesota, and be able to get a modal breakdown of the traffic volumes, estimated or actual. And so we essentially have this for cars and trucks and commercial vehicles and things, but I know Michael Lowry from University of Idaho, I don't know if he's on this call, but he's done this for bicycles in Washington State, and it would be fantastic to do something similar for even the Twin Cities Metro of Minnesota, or ideally the whole state, so that when we have a project that comes up, we can have access to numbers directly around that location right away. So that's all I have. If there's questions, please let me know. Again, this link right here, I guess I'll keep my finger on it too if you want to copy it down, but that's there's more information on our website as to what we've been doing and how the information has been used. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. We actually have a few questions for you as well. So the first question is from Elizabeth Stoltz. Her question is, how did you come up with a factoring and estimation process?
That's a good question. Well, I called up my good friend Greg Lindsay, and and he was able to provide some ideas. We also, like I mentioned, we tapped the knowledge of some of the motor vehicle traffic analysts and tried to put together something that kind of took into account all of those various opinions. If you're interested, Liz, or if others are interested, feel free to reach out to me, email or phone, and I can share the methodology with you. It didn't seem revolutionary necessarily, and we were getting our data from the closest weather stations according to NOAA, and just looking at daily volumes rather than trying to aggregate up from estimating or imputing hourly data.
Okay, great. And we'll be sure to share the presentations with everybody after this. So if the links that are embedded throughout the presentation, they'll be able to go back and reference later as well. So the next question is from Shane Sawyer. What has been the primary use or uses or application for the count data that's been collected to date?
That's a good question. In terms of the portable equipment, because we are fairly actively tracking the reason for each installation, the majority of those have been for just like baseline data collection. Maybe there was interest in connecting a trail in that area and they wanted to, before the project was started or before they had funding, trying to understand traffic flows. It's been used for some safe routes to school data collection, trying to understand some basic performance measures, and ideally, as far as I'm aware, it hasn't been done yet, but try and get people miles traveled would be another one. I guess I say it hasn't been done yet in terms of using MnDOT's counters specifically, but I know that like Parks and Trails Council or some of our regional development organizations have been able to supplement some of their own counters and be able to use some of our permanent sites to then extrapolate or expand their short duration counts to annual numbers, and in that way get people miles traveled for various trails and segments in their area. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways.
Okay. The next question is again from Elizabeth. She asked, did you count at that particular crosswalk for 24 hours? If so, what technology did you use, and did you count at night?
Yeah, so it was, I think it was 11 days or so. It was almost 2 weeks of video footage at both of those crossings. And so it was video, and the numbers were, I guess, aggregated through manually viewing the video. And we, therefore, because it was manually reviewed, we were not able to get night counts because there wasn't enough light for people to be seen. However, right now, or recently, we did a recount, and then I also had at the same time a portable eco counter pyro box on the where the gap in the fence is. And so even though we won't get video footage during the night hours, we should still get actual volumes.
Great. She has another question as well. And how did you calculate AADT?
In terms of like the number 5 thing that I showed?
I believe that's what she's referencing, yes.
This? So this I stole from the city of Minneapolis, and we do not have this yet for MnDOT.
Okay.
So I don't know the precise methodology.
Is there a link to the study from where this came from, perhaps that we could share later on? Or is this in development?
Sorry, what was the last part?
I was just asking if there was a way to perhaps find that methodology.
Yeah, I'll reach out to the city and see. I guess, yeah, I'll follow up with you, Nathan.
Okay, great. All right, we have one last question here from Sky Tallman asking, are there any circumstances under which a bicycle or pedestrian count is required?
Not at this point. However, we are looking at ways in which we can write it into various programs that we fund. So like it's similar to MPOs, but there's regional development commissions around the state, or organizations around the state that MnDOT gives money to carry forth or carry out lots of different planning and engineering things. And so within their requirements, we can provide a need for doing some of these counts. And then we're also hoping to change a few policies as well in terms of scoping or project management, I guess, earlier on in project management, to see if we can get some basic data collection or counts mandatory. But at this point in time, nothing is required.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your questions thus far. I don't see any more at the moment. If we see some more later throughout the presentation or whatnot, we'll certainly circle back to you, Michael. But thank you for presenting. This is some great information. It's good to see how it can be done at the DOT level. Next, we'll switch it over to Sarah, and she'll be able to give us her perspective.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Searcy. I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Manager at ITRE. ITRE is a chartered research institute within North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I'm very happy to give an overview of North Carolina's statewide bicycle and pedestrian counting program, and then I will share a little bit of information on how we share our count data with our local agency partners. So North Carolina's non-motorized volume data program is a research project to test the bicycle and pedestrian count protocol and replicate this methodology across the state. It is a sponsored research project sponsored by North Carolina Department of Transportation. We're currently entering our 6th year, so the project originally kicked off back in November of 2013. The primary motivation behind the program is to calculate statistics for bicycles and pedestrians on the network in North Carolina. In order to calculate those statistics, you need a common, consistent system to measure volume on your facility network. So you can use this information to understand current trends and model future usage. You can evaluate at different levels, including site, corridor, and region. And then, of course, you can share the data at varying levels, at the local agency level, the regional level, and at the state level. The foundation of a good non-motorized volume data program is a combination of continuous monitoring and short duration counts. So your continuous monitoring using permanent counting locations provide your temporal coverage, while your short duration counts provide your geographic or spatial coverage. Currently, our program in North Carolina is focused on establishing a representative sample of continuous count stations. We establish these stations based on what we hypothesize to be the travel activity at the count locations, and then grouping the locations into factor groups by the similar travel activity. It's very similar to the methodology used for establishing factor groups and counting locations for motorized travel monitoring. In fact, many non-motorized volume data programs, their framework is based on the lessons learned and the techniques that were derived from motorized volume monitoring. So over the past 6 years, as I said, this was a research project, so the primary focus was testing and applying a methodology. So there was a list of tasks that needed to be accomplished in order for that coordinated data collection to coalesce into a formal program. So we started with a sampling plan, training of our internal staff and local agency partners, site selection, all the way through the data collection, the cleaning and correction of the data, and the final reporting of the data. So since August of last year, I became the project manager and the program manager at ITRE for the Bicycle and Pedestrian program. So over the course of the past year, I took the lessons learned from our phase 1 and phase 2 of the program, and I used that to kind of restructure our program to become more efficient and also to serve our local agency partners and to serve the state better. So what we ended up doing was we took our list of tasks that fed into a formal program, and we organized them within 3 coordination areas. So we have a local agency coordination, an equipment coordination, and a data coordination area that's encompassed by project management. And what that allows us to do is become a little bit more nimble as we think about expanding our program from a smaller region in the state to full statewide coverage. So as I said before, the program kicked off in November of 2013, and we're going into our 6th year. Currently, as of June 2018, we have 48 formal stations that are installed. This represents 71 individual loggers or 141 unique bicycle and pedestrian sensors. When we began this project, in terms of our geographic coverage, we focused on conceptualizing it using NCDOT's administrative regions. They're called divisions. There's 14 total. So in our pilot phase in phase 1, we focused on divisions 7 and 9, and then we focused on 4 additional divisions in our phase 2. This slide here shows the current distribution of our counting locations across the state as of May of this year. So the red locations represent the locations that were selected and installed during our phase 1 or our pilot phase. The green locations represent the counting locations that were selected and installed during phase 2. And then the black markers represent counters that were purchased and installed under a separate research project, but the data is included in our formal non-motorized volume data program. As of this year, or this summer, we're currently exploring a strategy to opt local agencies into our program under a data management and reporting scope of work. That allows counters that were purchased and installed outside of our program, so counters that weren't involved in our formal site selection under our research project, for that data to be onboarded into our program. So this strategy is going to allow us to scale across the state fairly rapidly. We know that there are dozens of counters that have been purchased outside of our program that would benefit from the data going through our formal QA/QC process, that would benefit from being validated, and the data could be integrated into our statewide database. I'm going to transition now to talk a little bit about how we report our data to our local agency partners. So as it's established, we do quarterly data reports and annual data reports. And so that quarterly data goes through a QA/QC process where the data is checked and any data that's resulting from equipment error is removed from the data set, and then we provide it to our local agency partners within 30 days of the last day of the reporting period. The second major data set is our annual data. It's 1 year of cleaned and corrected data with a summary statistics report, and it represents the period from December through November of the previous year. This data report is provided in a screen line to aggregate counts on both sides of a facility by mode. Our current process is to have a counter involved in the quarterly data reporting until one full program year after it's installed, so December through November, and after that time period for that counter, there would only be an annual data report provided. So just to give you a sense of what those data reports look like from the period of 2014 through 2018, both our quarterly and our annual data reports were provided in an Excel spreadsheet format. The data at the quarterly level, of course, was checked for data resulting from equipment error. The annual data was not only rigorously QA/QC'd, it's also corrected using a correction factor that's derived from a field validation study. In addition to the annual data set, we also provided a site narrative that provides contextual information about each of the counting locations and some summary statistics. Beginning in this year, we've transitioned our reporting to EcoVisio. So EcoVisio is a software that's provided by our equipment vendor. We use eco counters currently. What we were trying to do is become a little bit more efficient and timely with our data reporting. And the new version of EcoVisio, EcoVisio 5, has a dashboard format where we're able to process our data through our QA/QC and validation, bring it into the EcoVisio dashboard system, and then provide not only a map of the counters, provide the summary statistics, but also the tabular data, and we can include as well disclaimers that provide context on how we process the data and kind of the level of data quality between our quarterly and annual data reports. So we have found this to be a very good platform so far, especially thinking as we grow our program across the state, knowing as we bring more counters on, there's more data to process, more data to report. So far in this beginning stage of testing out this new reporting process, it has worked very well for us. Finally, we have a website. So this website for our data program includes history of the program. It includes all of the documentation and data sets for both phase 1, phase 2, and our ongoing work. So I definitely recommend that you check this website out, especially paying attention to our phase 1 final report. It has all of the details on how the program was established, the nitty-gritty of the site selection, the way that we derived our QA/QC process, and a little bit of a summary analysis of our data. And we're currently working on the update to that report for phase 2. We're also currently working on a program evaluation. So that program evaluation would take a look at the 6 years since this program was established. We're reaching out to our local agency partners through a survey, through phone meetings, just to get a sense of the progress, get a sense of the challenges, the weaknesses, and strategize about a way to move forward for our program. To end, I just want to share a little information about key contacts for our program. course, there's me, I'm the program manager, and then we have an equipment coordinator, that's Craig, and then a data coordinator. And it takes a pretty big team effort to make this program work. It's a team effort at the ITRE level as an agent on behalf of NCDOT. It takes a lot of coordination with our various local agency partners at varying scales. And so it's always good to give kudos to the hard work that has to be put in to make this successful by folks across all agencies and all levels. So that's all I have to share with you today. I welcome questions, welcome feedback. I really would like to hear also from the attendees on their experiences with their data collection program.
Great. Well, thank you, Sarah. Now we're going to go into a few questions, which we do have a few. For those who are interested, if you'd like to ask your questions verbally instead of having to use the question pod, because it can be a little clunky, just let us know either in the chat or somewhere we can unmute you. That way you can just ask your questions on the phone. But actually, I do have a question. What would you say is probably some of the key lessons that you've learned as you've been going from your phase 1 to the phase 2 portion of this program?
I would say communication is key. Because this program started out as a research project, there's a lot of testing of different methods and ways of doing things, and sometimes people partners further downstream have the advantage of the lessons learned in the beginning. So always striving to make sure everybody is on the same page about what's happening in the here and now, and making sure that you solicit feedback and apply that feedback to your processes. I know one big piece of feedback we've had from our partners is wanting the data almost in real time. So wanting the data in a timely manner so that they can apply it to their planning process, apply it to whatever projects they're working on. And so we've tried to listen to that feedback and also be reasonable and realistic about what we can achieve with providing that final data deliverable. Another key takeaway too is that this is a very quickly evolving field, the bicycle and pedestrian data, and conversations like this, opportunities to come together and learn from one another are really important to see where everyone is at and how we can learn from one another. The QA/QC in particular, I think that's something that we can all learn from one another to become more consistent. I think the future of this data is to come up with some sort of standardized process that all organizations can use to make sure that their data is good, that they're providing to the public and to their local agency partners.
Great, thank you. I do have one other question too. In regards to the equipment, in terms of it being out in the field, did you all have any significant issues in terms of the environment, with there being any sort of difficulty due to exposure, especially during events where there was perhaps a lot of bad weather or anything else like that?
I've had issues related to the environment. So we've had issues related to our soil type. So we have a clay soil in many parts of our state that's highly acidic, and it also doesn't drain very well. So that leads to a secondary issue of moisture or humidity affecting systems. And then we also have a climate here in North Carolina that insects really love, and they really love to make nests in our posts that house our counting equipment. So there are issues that we've had to deal with, and I think those are actually any agency that is utilizing equipment that's out in the environment will have to come up with some strategy to mitigate it. And for us, it's making sure that our connections are properly encased, making sure that we perform regular inspections of the equipment. It's not going to solve all of the problems. We do have a very good team that we work with at EcoCounter that helps us with our troubleshooting, helps us walk through the maintenance process. So it's really one, being aware of the issues, and at this point we're very aware of the issues that commonly plague our systems, and two, having a good support system to diagnose and mitigate those issues as quickly as possible. Because when a system is down, it's not collecting data. When it's not collecting data, your agency partners aren't going to be receiving that complete product that they expect. At the same time, setting a reasonable expectation about what that data product is going to look like. There will never be an instance where you have 365 complete days of perfect data. So really having that conversation and being sure that everybody is seeing eye to eye.
Great, well, thank you. I'll go ahead and just read off the few questions here that we have. First one is again from Elizabeth Stoles. Her question is, how did you come to the conclusion you needed to reorganize the program at ITRE? Is there any specific lesson that you learned or that you can recommend for doing anything different during the early years of building the program?
A very good question. So it came to the point where we needed to have a little bit of specialization or acknowledgement of specialization with the staffing on the project. And because we're a research institute, no one at the research institute works 100% on one project. So we knew that we needed to be a little bit more nimble too. And so we have recognized experts at ITRE based on their experience with this project. And so that was how I approached it. I knew we had experts on the equipment and the maintenance, and that is a job on its own. We have experts on the data and the processing of the data and bring it into our reporting system. That is a job on its own. And so that little bit of specialization and then also empowering your staff to have ownership of those tasks, it really makes a difference. And it really makes a difference when you grow to scale to cover large geographic areas. And it's a kind of a natural progression. With this project, we had a list of 12 tasks. Being a research project, and you check off your tasks as you go, you culminate in a final report. But what ended up being recognized is that this isn't a typical research project. It's a cyclical program, and so it needs to be organized as a cyclical program.
Okay, great. I see that Sarah Bryan is going through and muting a few people for their that have a few questions. So Liz or Josh, if you would like to chime in, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. This is Liz Stoltz. Hey, Sarah, I'd like the new organization. Do you think that the way you've organized the program would work elsewhere, or is it really very specific to being at a university and specific to being at North Carolina?
I think it could be used elsewhere. And I also think, too, that it's very reasonable to divide the coordination areas across different agency types. For instance, if you had your local government be empowered to handle the hardware coordination and have a consultant or a research institute handle the data, it's a very reasonable set of expectations. So I really think it allows a lot more flexibility in how you assign roles and responsibilities, but it would also result in the acknowledgement that coordination needs to happen at the varying levels.
This is Josh from Oregon DOT. Thanks for the information you've presented. I'm curious on if you have information at your fingertips on cost for each of the permanent site installations, both at the site level and then each of the devices. Just curious on what it's costing you guys out there.
If you would, I can follow up with you because it's going to vary based on the way that a site is specified and also kind of the types of costs that are included, including, for instance, maintenance and validation or the data transmission. So can I follow up with you with a little bit more details?
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'm also curious in terms of how you guys are processing your data into like getting at the link flows. Has I think it's relatively easy to do with EcoVisio for permanent sites. And is it, so is that how you're sort of aggregating everything within EcoVisio? And then following that, have you guys thought about how you'll do that for your portable sites, your short-term sites?
Yes. So when you say aggregating, do you mean to the screen line?
That's right.
Yes. So this detail is probably important. We currently are using EcoCounter's API to access the data. So the API allows us to access the full collection of data that is collected by our counters in our program, all the way down to the data stream level. And then from that point, we're able to aggregate to the screen line. And so just a little bit of background on our data process. As I mentioned before, we have an established set of QA/QC protocols. They started out in as most processes do, in a collection of Excel workbooks, and we've worked really hard over the past year or so to transition this process into a web-based application. So that web-based application is a combination of accessing our data through the API and then using Python and a SQL database and a set of scripts to process the data through our QA/QC checks in a nearly automatic way. And then it is enabled to produce our data reports that we can bring into EcoVisio. So currently there's not a two-way movement on the API. We can only bring data out of EcoVisio with the API, but not back in. But the hope is that there will be some evolution with the API on EcoCounter's end over time, and hopefully we'll be able to make the process even more efficient by bringing the data back through that connection. So I think, we're very interested too in testing the non-motorized data module within TMAS. We've been working on integrating TMG data formatting into our application. That's something I know that a collection of states are working at. I don't think anybody's 100% there, but it will be really exciting to see if we can come up with some sort of standardized process to transform data in various formats into that final TMG that the FHWA is looking for.
Great. Well, thank you both. This last question was from Carl. Seems like he's still muted at the moment, so I'll go ahead and read this out. His question is, what has been done to encourage local governments to collect and share their bicycle and pedestrian count data with ITRE?
So currently, I mentioned this in the presentation, ITRE and NCDOT have been working together, and we've come up with a scope of work to opt in data from EcoCounters that were purchased and installed outside of our program. So currently, we are onboarding 10 counters that are owned by the City of Raleigh Parks and Recreation and Cultural Resources Department, and also 3 counters that are owned by the town of Cary. And what this means is that their counters end up being a part of our program through the data. So we will validate their counters using our field study technique, and then we'll also run the data through our QA/QC and then our quarterly and annual reporting process. So we see this as a good strategy to bring in counters, whose data format kind of fits our established processes as a first step. We're also in the process of establishing a relationship with the Department of Human and Health Services with the state. They've recently purchased a set of portable pedestrian counters. We see this as a good opportunity not only for some advisement on the site selection for those counters, but also to bring the final data collected into our program. So these are all kind of new initiatives. Really, the partnership building is the result of really good communication. So agencies at different levels have learned that NCDOT has this program, and then ITRE as an agent of NCDOT gets to help strategize and come up with a plan to make it happen. And again, speaks to how quickly moving this field is. And you really have to be nimble to adapt to the different ways that people want to collect data, how they want to analyze it, how they want to store and report it.
Hey, Sarah, I have another question. This is Liz Stoltz again. Are you going to use some set criteria to do the 6-year program evaluation? And if so, are you hiring a consultant to do that? Are you developing that in-house? Are you following a methodology somewhere else for program evaluation?
So we're doing it in-house, and I'll be happy to talk with you about it offline, because since we're in the process of doing it within the scope of our current project. So I'll be happy to talk with you about it more offline.
That would be great, because we'd love to hear the criteria you're going to use. So thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
I have one question. This is Michael Petesch. Question for Sarah. How many full-time staff do you have working for you or working on this project?
I'll need to do a quick calculation. So we have, let's see, just 1 second, let me think. We have myself, Craig is our equipment coordinator, Blythe is our data coordinator. We've recently split the equipment coordination into 2 leads. So there's a hardware lead, Craig is the hardware lead, and we have a validation lead. And then within data coordination, we have a processing lead, and then we have an analysis lead. So that's 2, 4, myself, and then we have several staff who have been historically involved with the project that don't help as regularly on the project, but are an important part of its success. But none of the staff that I've named are full-time on the project. They're between 20 to 40% on the project.
Okay. So, like, is it about 12 or so that have familiarity and work 40-ish% or more, or sorry, 20% or more on the project?
That's a good estimate.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have, because we are housed within the university, we have several undergraduate students that we employ to help with data reduction related tasks, and occasionally we'll have a grad student or more help with the project.
Great. And then it's not a follow-up, but it's still another question. So when, as I was explaining our portable counting, we kind of rent them out as library books. So there's one counter that moves around to a lot of different locations, and the data that's taken at each of those locations is tied to that specific point. How do you guys do something similar with your short duration counts? And if so, how do you manage that within your EcoVisio or QA/QC checking?
So within EcoVisio, we establish a station record in the counter management system for each counting location. Short duration count program is not formally established, so our experience with short duration counting is relative to the counts we collected to inform the selection of our permanent counter locations. But we're hoping, especially with our developing partnership with the Department of Human Health Services, to establish the formal short duration count program. But we work within the counter management system in EcoVisio to establish the records for the count locations.
Okay. And is the as far as I'm interested in a lot of different aspects of your methodology, do you have a specific, like a methodology specific report, or is that just all within the, I think it was a project 1 or phase 1 report that you had mentioned?
So So we're working on the update to the Phase 1 report. So technically, this phase of the project will close next October. So no later than next October, we will have the report written, but we'll be producing some interim white papers as well. So I'll keep your contact information, and as we post our interim deliverables, I can share that information with you. And of course, if you want to follow up through email or conversation on the phone with any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. We still have a few more questions here. Carlos and Shane, I see that you both have a few questions, and you should be both unmuted at this time. So if you'd like to ask your questions or whatnot, please feel free to chime in.
Hi, this is Carlos from Santa Monica. One of the questions I really have is we're actually looking at being able to do some remote or big data testing on counts as it pertains to walk and bike. And I'm just curious, has anyone used any of this streetlight data pertaining to walk and bike for AADTs?
I don't have any experience with that data.
Yeah, this is Michael Petesch from MnDOT again. We've done very little in terms of using the biking and walking data within Streetlight. It's primarily been used for motor vehicles, primarily because the information that has been released is just not robust enough to be useful for us. And in northern states, we have very drastic weather changes, and the only information that was available was, I think, in summer months, and it'd be better if it was spring or fall, because that's kind of the medium in between in terms of volumes. But we hope to use it more in the future. At this point in time, it just hasn't been very useful for us.
This is Josh Roll from Oregon DOT. I'm chairing a research team that's looking to incorporate some of these third-party data from Strava, from the Streetlight, other sources like Bike Share. The research team being led by Sarisha Kothuri from Portland State. We're still negotiating with some of the data vendors to get the data, and the idea is to come up with a methodology that would be open to anyone who would end up purchasing different data sources to apply it in combination with permanent count data. I think it's interesting to note that even on the vehicle side, a lot of these data vendors, some of these data vendors haven't necessarily proven themselves, I guess, in my opinion, for even the motorized count data. So, I'm trying to maintain a healthy skepticism on what we can do with these other data sources for non-motorized. But I think there's a lot of potential, and there is a link on NHTSA's, Portland State University's University Transportation Center, NHTSA's website, a little bit more information about that project. And it's a pooled fund that's run by the University Transportation Center. And so if there's interest in anyone on the call and participating, we're certainly entertaining additional participants.
So on that note, this is Sarah O'Brien. I'll just say if there's anybody on the webinar that wants to speak directly to that, or has other examples of using big data, and you want to raise your hand, you can use that to raise your hand, and I can unmute you so that you can also share or contribute to this conversation.
All right. This is Liz Stoltz. I'm interested in participating. I'm sure that FDOT would be interested, which is a project I'm working on right now, using these big data sets. We are exploring a project right now related to transit application usage for bike ped volume data. And what we're looking at is what can we use some of these data sets like you're talking about that are really subsets of the entire facility traffic. And if it's just used as a QA/QC data set or something else, we're going to find that out in this research project that we're currently doing at FDOT. So let us know how we can get in touch with you, and we'd be happy to share our results as well.
Great, Liz. I'll follow up with you offline.
Okay, well, I don't want to cut anyone off here, but I do want to make sure that Shane gets his question in. Shane Scheuer asked, what methodology are the NC State folks using to convert short duration counts to meaningful or accurate ADT or other types of annual counts?
It's a very good question, and we are not there yet. And so the primary focus of our project to start was to establish the program. And I think it's safe to say we were successful in establishing the program. It took a lot of hard work and many people's input and expertise for that to happen. And now we're moving into a phase of the program where we can start doing these sorts of analyses and contributing to the discussion of methodologies related to calculating statistics from our data. And so it's a very good question. We're at the point where we can start addressing it.
Okay, great. Carl, I see that you entered in some information here. Unfortunately, we can't click on it at that time, but we should be able to at least grab that and put it into a summary information later on after this. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that was just related to the question from the Santa Monica representative. Here in Texas, TxDOT and TTI have joined together, completed a pretty solid research effort about non-motorized data collection, and as part of that, created some seasonal factoring and scaling with Strava data. And it's not all the way there, but it's a really good effort.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing. Well, it sounds like those are all the questions that we have at the moment. Sarah, Brian, if you'd like, you can go ahead and switch the presenter over to me, and I'll put this last slide up. Perhaps somebody will think of a question in the next few minutes here. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. This is a great, had a good discussion on all these topics. It's great to be able to commune and talk about these items and share ideas with one another. I'd like to thank everybody who was behind the scenes with assisting and making sure that this session ran well today, and especially to Michael and Sarah for sharing their knowledge, as well as everyone else. This was a great opportunity, and please be sure to look forward to the next one, which is tentatively scheduled for September 24th, but the topic is currently to be determined. We'll be providing some updates to you following this session. So be sure to stay tuned. If you haven't signed up for the Bike and Ped Data Committee's subcommittee newsletter or for that information, we'll be sure to send it on to you all. For those who are going to be at the APB conference in August, we'll be sure to see you there. And seeing no further questions or no comments at this time, we will go ahead and end today's session. Again, thank you everyone for being on today and providing all this information. So thank you. We'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thanks.